In this lesson, we'll learn one method for correcting the lens distortion affecting our image, and then we'll begin to decay our building by taking pieces out of it. All right, so in the previous lesson, we worked on positioning these buildings that we had brought in from that Chicago image. Now, let me hide my rulers really quickly with a Control-R. You may notice here down at the bottom of my layer stack, I also have a mountains group that I've added. Now, we didn't do that in the last lesson, but I treated this just like it were a building, and I added this mountain range in. Now, to do that, I used this particular image right here, and this image can be found in your project files, again, in the Images folder. If you look in the Sky folder, you'll find this particular image. So treat that just like one of those buildings. And if I come over here and hide the base image in the buildings, you can see how I've oriented that mountain range. Now, bringing those back, looking at the mountain range, later on in this course, we're going to have to push that mountain range back some because it's kind of challenging the skyline that we've established here. But I like that element just because it kind of gives some kind of a grounding element to this space back here. So with that said, let's come back up here to our base image. Now, if we hide the buildings for right now, remember we have this kind of this edge that we need to fix right here. We've got this edge that is kind of at an angle, and the same thing is going on this side of our image as well, just a little bit. And again, this is because of the lens and how close these elements were to the edge of the image itself. So now, depending on how much experience you have with Photoshop, you may have used the lens correction filter right up here to correct lens distortion like this, but instead of using that filter this time, I'm going to use a little different method. Now, this is a masked layer. Remember, if I shift-click that mask, we can hide it. We still have all of our original pixels from this from this image. So let me just hide that. And instead of making these changes on this layer, being that this is our only copy of this image in the layer, let's just drag the layer down to the new layer button, which will make a copy of it. So with the copy made, let's select the mask and then right-click on it. You'll find this Apply Layer Mask option here. So if I do that, it's going to flatten that mask onto the pixel layer. So basically, we no longer have a sky on this layer, which is exactly what we want. So a lot of people will come in and create a new layer above that, then merge the two layers. That's another way of doing it. So now let's go ahead and tackle this left side first. We've got this kind of this portion right here that just feels like it's crooked. So we can come in here and maybe grab our polygonal lasso tool again. And remember, these are transparent pixels out here, so we don't need to worry about them. So let's just come in here and we'll just click right about there. And I'm just going to make a selection by clicking several times right along here. Just kind of get that little doorway in there as well. Now I'm making this particular selection because I'm focusing on seams. So little areas where there's seams, kind of like that. We'll just bring that back around and complete that selection. There we go. So now we've made our selection. Well, if we grab our move tool, we could pick that up and we could move that around. We could do whatever we want with it. But I'm going to undo that, and we're going to free transform this. So instead of going to the edit menu though, let's do that quick with a Control-T. And now free transform, you can grab these controls and you can scale and you can transform it like this. But you can also hold down the Control key and you can grab just one corner. So you can see how that works. Now, basically, what we want to do is we want to control and drag this to the left to the point where we can straighten this edge right here. Now, in order to kind of base this on something completely vertical, we can bring our rulers back and pull out a guide just to kind of measure by, sort of like that. And I'm going to hold down the Control key. We'll just drag that to the left until we get that edge lined up. That looks pretty good. Now, if we come over here, we can kind of base these other vertical lines and make sure everything else is lining up, which it looks like it is. So let's go ahead and undo that, and we'll hit Enter to confirm that transformation. Now, we've got this guide. We'll just drag it back off the canvas there and deselect with a Control D, and you can see here that for the most part that is really straight. That looks good, but as a result of that free transformation we have sort of this little gap right here, which if we were to undo that deselection, we could come in here and maybe use our arrow keys to nudge that a little bit. See if we can't nudge that maybe 2 or 3 times, and let's deselect now. Now that gap is much more manageable. We've got a little gap right here though, so let's do this. We'll just come in and grab our brush. Again, we've got our hard round brush, and I'm simply going to sample from this area right here, holding down my Alt key, and we'll shrink that brush down by Alt right-clicking and dragging, and I'm just simply going to paint that in. Maybe sample there. Just kind of make sure that blends appropriately. All right, great. So that side is fixed. That seam is gone. We can look at that, and it looks pretty good. Now, let's come over here to the right-hand portion. This one's a little different. So there's not a lot of seams vertically here to work with. So let's go ahead and make another selection out of this. We'll just simply come in and again make our selection where we got a seam. And I'm going to bring that kind of around like so. I'm just going to bring that straight down. And where does that end? Let's go ahead and bring it straight down to there. We'll bring it over and up here. Kind of like that. Okay, great. So, yep, we picked a pretty good seam there. So now if we free transform this one, we could try and get the same result by holding down the Control key. Look at the seam that's forming there, though. So we want to be really careful with this one. So let me hit Escape to cancel that. I'm going to pull out a guide just to kind of guide my way here. And let's go ahead and free transform, and let's go ahead and pull that out. And I'm also paying attention to these little white lines, trying to make sure that those line up like they should, but it looks like they're shifting down a little bit. So let's do this. While this is free transformed, we can right-click on it and choose Warp. And now we can kind of grab these intersections in this grid and nudge that up just a little bit. So if we nudge that up kind of like that, we can get those lines to line right back up here. We could even try and maybe pull that over just a little bit to the left. Kind of watching these vertical lines up here to be certain that we're not shifting them too much. So we might come in, kind of pull that just like that. So that's pretty close. We still have a little bit of a gap. Let's hit Enter on that and deselect. But we can fix this. We can fix this really easily. So let's get rid of our guide here. We'll just pull that off and zoom in, and let's use one of the healing tools here inside of Photoshop. Now, there's a lot of different healing tools here, and this is one of them right here. This is the patch tool. There's the spot healing brush. There is the healing brush, the patch tool, even the content aware move tool now with CS6. So in this particular case, let's go ahead and grab the patch tool. So the way this works is what we're going to do is we're going to draw a selection over an area that needs to be fixed. So you see here when we still don't have quite, those areas aren't quite lined up. So let me just grab that selection right there, and we'll just grab this and move it a little bit to the left. And you can see I have this set to content aware. What that's going to do is allow Photoshop to examine the new area and figure out on its own, through some kind of Photoshop magic, exactly what pixels need to be there. So if I undo that, you can see just that little subtle change has allowed Photoshop to kind of fix that little hiccup in those seams. So now we have a little bit more challenging area up here in this vicinity right here. So let's go ahead and make a selection. Just kind of drag that to the right a little bit. Deselect. You can see Photoshop's doing a pretty good job of figuring out exactly what pixels need to be there. Now, we want to make sure we don't drag it up or down, because you can see here that we want it to line up. So we've got that to line up as well. Come over here and grab this little sliver right here. Let me undo that. Now this isn't perfect. It doesn't work every time 100%, so you may have to do this more than once on an area. And this is being a little bit difficult here, so let's just grab our brush, our handy brush, and we'll just paint over that. And come up here and run a little stroke along that seam. All right, that's looking really good. Just zoom out on that. So that corrects the lens distortion that we had affecting our image. Now, at this point, we talked a little bit about wanting to age and distress this building some. And there's a couple of areas here where we could definitely do that. Now, let's come over and add a mask to this layer that we've created here. Let's click on the layer mask button down there. And now we're going to grab a brush. So I'll go ahead and grab my brush tool with the keyboard shortcut B, and I'm going to scroll down here until I find my structure brushes. These are just kind of, let me just grab this structure 3 and I'll show you what it does. So if I were to paint on this layer here with this structure brush, you can see it's just kind of an abstract shape that is creating structure. So I'm going to use this to come in and create my mask. So we'll just select a mask, kind of pick out an area here that we want to damage on the building. Now this brush does have some pressure sensitive transparency options in terms of the opacity, so you may need to come in and kind of tweak this with a hard round brush, because you can kind of see some of the areas that aren't getting completely masked out. As a matter of fact, if I alt click on the mask, some of these gray areas right here, they're just not completely masked out. So let me alt click and go back, and we'll just come in here and again chisel out kind of an area maybe where this wall has been knocked down over time. So feel free to make this look whatever you, however you want. I would encourage you not to go too overboard with this. Let me come over here. Maybe we got one right there. Maybe there's a smaller one right over here, somewhere around here. So again, don't go too overboard with this. This is creating the look or the illusion that this is an abandoned city is going to take much more than just knocking some holes in this building. So again, like I said, don't go too overboard. We don't want them to be the primary focus. We want the building as a whole to be the focus of basically the end result of our work. So in this lesson, we have fixed the lens distortion affecting our image, and we've also begun to knock some holes into some of the elements of the building. Now, I mentioned before that this is virtually a brand new building, so there's really not a lot of dirt and decay and grime affecting the building at all. So I tell you what, in the next lesson, let's fix that. Let's go ahead and add in a texture to build our dirt and our grime off of. So we'll get started with that in the next lesson.